High above the rugged plains of western Bolivia, stretching as far as the eye can see, lies one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the ancient world, the Sajama Lines. Picture this: thousands of perfectly straight paths carved into the earth, some running for miles without deviation, crisscrossing the landscape like a giant's chessboard. These aren't just random scratches on the land. They're precise, deliberate, and unimaginably vast, so vast, in fact, that they can only be fully appreciated from the sky. But here's the twist: they were created centuries before humans could even dream of flight. Who could have made these colossal markings, and why? What secrets do they hold, hidden in plain sight for generations? You've probably heard of the Nazca Lines, those famous geoglyphs in Peru that have puzzled scientists for decades. But the Sajama Lines, they're like Nazca's bigger, older, and far more mysterious cousin. Covering an area nearly 15 times larger, with lines that stretch up to 12 miles long, these ancient designs are a monumental feat of engineering, yet somehow they've slipped under the radar of mainstream history. Why haven't we heard more about them, and what does their sheer scale tell us about the people who created them? This isn't just a mystery, it's a window into a forgotten world, a puzzle waiting to be solved. Imagine standing on the ground, looking at what seems like nothing more than a faint trail in the dirt. Now imagine soaring above it, watching as those faint trails multiply into an intricate web, a masterpiece of precision and purpose. The Sajama Lines aren't just lines, they're a message, a map, a monument. But to what? A lost civilization's beliefs, a celestial calendar, a sacred pathway. The answers are as elusive as the lines themselves, and that's exactly what we're here to uncover. Together, we'll dive into the theories, the history, and the mind-bending scale of this ancient enigma. By the end, you'll see these lines and the people behind them in a whole new light, so buckle up. This isn't just a story about the past, it's a journey into the unknown. The story of how the outside world first encountered the Sajama Lines is as intriguing as the lines themselves. While local indigenous communities had known of their existence for generations, these colossal markings only entered modern scientific records in the early 20th century. Aviators flying over Bolivia's high-altitude plains were the first to truly grasp their scale. From the ground, they appeared as mere scratches, but from above, an astonishing geometric network revealed itself. Covering over 22,000 square kilometers, an area larger than some small countries, the lines form an intricate labyrinth of thousands of perfectly straight paths, some intersecting at precise angles, others running parallel for miles without a single curve. What makes them even more remarkable is how they were made. Unlike the Nazca Lines, which were created by removing darker surface stones to reveal lighter soil beneath, the Sajama Lines are shallow trenches etched directly into the earth. This technique required staggering precision, maintaining perfect straightness across rugged terrain, over hills and through valleys, with no modern tools to guide the way. The sheer labor involved suggests these weren't haphazard trails, but a coordinated effort spanning generations. Yet, because of their remote location in the windswept Bolivian altiplano, a high-altitude desert where temperatures swing violently between scorching days and freezing nights, studying them has been a logistical nightmare. Archaeologists have had to battle thin air, harsh weather, and vast distances just to document them, let alone decipher their purpose. Early theories about the lines ranged from the practical to the fantastical. Some researchers speculated they were ancient roadways, but why build paths in such a rigid, grid-like pattern? Others thought they might be celestial markers aligning with stars or solstices, yet no clear astronomical pattern has emerged. Then there are the more imaginative suggestions. Were they landing strips for extraterrestrials, sacred pathways for spiritual journeys? The truth is, we still don't know. What we do know is that whoever created them possessed an uncanny understanding of geometry and a determination to leave a mark so vast it would endure for centuries. And that's what makes them so captivating. They're a riddle wrapped in the dust of time, waiting for us to unravel. The Nazca Lines may steal the spotlight when it comes to ancient geoglyphs, but comparing them to the Sajama Lines is like comparing a sketch to a blueprint. Both fascinating, yet fundamentally different in scale and intention. At first glance, they share obvious similarities. Both were carved into the earth by pre-Columbian cultures, both remain shrouded in mystery, and both are best appreciated from the air. But that's where the parallels end. The Nazca Lines are famous for their elaborate figures, spirals, monkeys, even what looks like an astronaut etched into Peru's coastal desert. The Sajama Lines, by contrast, are all about geometry. Thousands of straight paths intersecting in a grid so precise it feels almost mathematical, stretching relentlessly across an area so vast it dwarfs the Nazca Plateau by a staggering margin. Then there's the altitude. While Nazca sits at a modest 1,500 feet above sea level, the Sajama Lines sprawl across the Bolivian altiplano, a high-altitude desert perched over 12,000 feet in the air. This isn't just a trivial difference, it's a clue. Creating these lines would have been an exhausting endeavor even at lower elevations, but at this height, where oxygen is thin and the sun burns relentlessly, the effort becomes almost superhuman. The people who made them weren't just artists or astronomers. They were endurance athletes working in conditions that would leave most modern visitors breathless after a short walk. Perhaps the biggest misconception is calling the Sajama Lines a forgotten cousin of Nazca. That framing implies they're a lesser-known version of the same idea, when in reality they're something entirely distinct. Nazca's figures feel ritualistic, almost ceremonial symbols meant to be seen, possibly by gods in the sky. The Sajama Lines, on the other hand, seem functional, systematic, like the skeleton of something far larger. Were they territorial markers, a sprawling irrigation blueprint, or something even more profound? Unlike Nazca, their purpose refuses to fit neatly into any single theory. And that's what makes them so extraordinary. They're not just another set of ancient lines, they're a challenge, daring us to rethink what we know about the past. The sheer scale of the Sajama Lines isn't just impressive, it's borderline incomprehensible. Picture standing at one end of a path so straight, so unwavering, that it vanishes into the horizon, stretching an astonishing 12 miles without deviating even a fraction of a degree. Now imagine thousands of these paths weaving across the landscape in a grid so precise it feels engineered by a machine. But here's the catch. These lines were carved centuries before the invention of theodolites or GPS, using nothing more than simple tools and an unimaginable amount of human labor. How did ancient cultures achieve such geometric perfection across such unforgiving terrain? Modern surveys have revealed something even more startling. While the lines appear random from ground level, aerial mapping shows many align with celestial events, solstices, equinoxes, or even specific star clusters. Some paths point directly to sacred mountains or distant volcanoes, suggesting they weren't just markings but part of a vast cosmological map. The precision is uncanny. Certain lines run parallel for miles, maintaining near-identical spacing, while others intersect at angles so exact they hint at advanced mathematical understanding. This wasn't just art, it was a language of the land, written in straight lines and right angles. The real mystery lies in the execution. Without drones or satellites, how did they maintain such accuracy over vast distances? One theory suggests they used smoke or mirrors to align sightlines, while others propose they might have relied on long ropes or wooden stakes to plot each segment. But even these methods falter when you consider the terrain: rolling hills, rocky outcrops, and sudden drops that would challenge even modern surveyors. And yet, the lines don't waver. They climb slopes, cross valleys, and continue unbroken, as if the land itself bowed to the will of their creators. Then there's the question of manpower. Carving just one of these paths would require a small army working for months, if not years. Multiply that by thousands, and you're looking at a generations-long project, a collective effort spanning lifetimes. What could compel an entire civilization to dedicate so much labor to something with no obvious practical use? Were they tracing the footsteps of gods? Marking pilgrimage routes or creating a celestial calendar vast enough to be read by the heavens themselves? Every answer only leads to deeper questions, pulling us further into the enigma of these ancient masterminds and their impossible lines. To understand the Sajama Lines, we must step into the world of the Aymara people, the indigenous inhabitants of this rugged landscape whose ancestors may have carved these enigmatic paths. The Aymara have thrived in the high-altitude plains of the Andes for thousands of years, their culture deeply intertwined with the land, the sky, and the sacred mountains that dominate the horizon. Among these peaks, the towering Sajama volcano, Bolivia's tallest mountain, holds a special place in their cosmology, not just as a geographical landmark but as a living entity, a god known as Apu Sajama, protector and giver of life. The Aymara worldview offers tantalizing clues about the line's purpose. Unlike Western perspectives that separate the spiritual from the practical, their traditions see no division between the two. The earth isn't just soil and rock, it's a living being, a canvas for communication with the divine. Could the Sajama Lines be part of this dialogue? Some researchers point to Aymara rituals still practiced today, like the Siechala offerings of coca leaves, alcohol, or llama blood poured onto the earth to honor Pachamama, the Mother Earth. These ceremonies often follow straight paths mirroring the lines themselves. Were the ancient markings part of a grander ritual, a way to channel energy or guide spiritual journeys across the land? Oral traditions add another layer to the mystery. Aymara elders speak of invisible lines radiating from sacred sites like Cusco in Peru, connecting temples, springs, and mountains in a vast spiritual network. While the Sajama Lines predate the Inca, the similarity is striking. Could they have served a parallel function, a web of sacred pathways linking holy sites, perhaps even aligning with celestial events? The Aymara calendar, tied to the movements of the sun and stars, suggests a society deeply attuned to the heavens. Certain lines align with solstice sunrises or the rising of key stars like the Pleiades, reinforcing the idea that these weren't random trails but a cosmic map etched into the earth. Then there's the practical side. The Aymara are master engineers of their environment, building raised fields to survive the harsh climate and managing water with intricate irrigation systems. Some theorists propose the lines acted as boundary markers for grazing lands or guided seasonal migrations of llamas. Others argue they were part of a vast communication system, with straight paths allowing smoke signals or reflected light to travel unimpeded across the plateau. But even these explanations can't fully account for the lines' staggering precision or their sheer scale. Perhaps the most compelling clue lies in the Aymara concept of tepi, a central point of balance between opposing forces where physical and spiritual worlds intersect. The Sajama Lines, rigid yet harmonious, might embody this principle, a physical manifestation of order in a chaotic world. Whether as sacred pathways, celestial markers, or something beyond our modern understanding, they reflect a culture that saw the land not as something to be conquered but as a partner in a grand, interconnected existence. And that's what makes them so haunting. They're not just relics of the past, they're a living testament to a worldview we're still struggling to decipher. Archaeological evidence surrounding the Sajama Lines is frustratingly sparse. A handful of pottery shards, stone tools, and faint traces of ancient fires scattered along the path. Unlike grand pyramids or buried cities, these lines left behind no towering ruins or hidden treasures, just whispers in the dirt, yet those whispers tell a story. Radiocarbon dating of charcoal fragments found near some lines suggests they were carved at least 2,000 years ago, possibly by the ancestors of the Aymara people. But here's where the plot thickens. Some researchers argue they could be far older, perhaps dating back 3,000 years or more. based on soil analysis and erosion patterns. Without definitive artifacts tying them to a specific culture or era, the timeline remains hotly debated. Part of the challenge lies in the landscape itself. The Bolivian altiplano is a merciless archivist. High winds scour the surface, rainfall, though rare, carves gullies, and freezing temperatures fracture rocks over centuries. Then there's the livestock. For generations, llamas and alpacas have trodden these paths, their hooves blurring the edges of the lines, while farmers occasionally repurpose ancient trenches for irrigation. It's a race against time to study them before natural and human activity erase finer details. One groundbreaking excavation near the town of Sajama uncovered something unexpected. Not tools or bones, but aligned piles of white quartz stones placed at precise intervals along certain lines. Quartz holds spiritual significance for Andean cultures, often used in rituals to channel energy. Were these markers guiding ceremonial processions, or were they primitive surveying aids helping ancient engineers maintain those uncannily straight paths? The stone's placement suggests intentionality, but their exact role remains speculative. Controversy flared when a team of geologists proposed an even older origin, arguing that some lines might predate human settlement altogether, carved by glacial activity or ancient waterways. Archaeologists swiftly countered glacial scratches don't form grids, and waterways don't run in perfect straight lines for miles. Yet the debate highlights how little we truly know. Every excavation seems to raise more questions than answers. Why are there so few artifacts near the lines? Did their creators deliberately leave no trace, or has time simply erased the evidence? Perhaps the most telling clue comes from satellite imaging. Advanced scans reveal subterranean anomalies, buried stone alignments, and what might be the remains of temporary campsites along certain routes. These hidden features hint at a workforce moving systematically across the landscape, possibly during seasonal gatherings. But without extensive excavation, a monumental task in this remote, high-altitude region, the full story stays locked beneath the dust. For now, the Sajama Lines keep their secrets, revealing just enough to tantalize but never enough to satisfy. Among the most compelling theories about the Sajama Lines is the idea that they served as sacred pathways, routes for ritual pilgrimages or ceremonial processions woven into the spiritual fabric of Andean life. Picture this: generations of travelers walking these precise, unwavering lines, not as mere trails but as channels of devotion, each step a prayer etched into the earth. The sheer straightness of the paths takes on new meaning when viewed through this lens. In many indigenous Andean traditions, straight lines symbolize connection, direct links between people, deities, and the natural world. A winding path might be practical, but a straight one, that's something sacred. This theory gains traction when you look at where the lines lead. Many converge at significant landmarks: the slopes of the Sajama volcano, springs considered holy for their life-giving waters, or secluded spots where offerings to Pachamama have been found. These aren't random intersections, they're deliberate in points, suggesting the lines functioned like spiritual highways guiding worshippers to places of power. Ethnographic records from nearby cultures offer striking parallels. The Inca, for instance, built straight ceremonial lines radiating from their capital, Cusco, to organize sacred space and ritual movement. While the Sajama predate the Inca, the resemblance is uncanny, hinting at a shared cosmological vision across the Andes. But why go to such extraordinary lengths to carve these paths? The answer might lie in the Andean concept of waka sacredness embodied in places or objects. A mountain isn't just rock and snow, it's a living deity. A spring isn't merely water, it's a portal to the underworld. By walking these straight paths, pilgrims may have been performing a form of spiritual alignment, physically tracing connections between earthly and divine realms. The line's unbroken straightness could have been crucial, ensuring no deviation disrupted the ritual's potency. Imagine the discipline required, maintaining a sacred pace, perhaps chanting or carrying offerings, all while following a path so exact it feels almost supernatural. There's also the communal aspect to consider. The line's vast scale suggests mass participation, entire communities converging for seasonal ceremonies, their collective movement reinforcing social and spiritual bonds. Some researchers point to modern Andean festivals where processions still follow ancient routes as echoes of this practice. During the annual Wilak Umu ceremony, for example, participants march in straight lines to sacred sites, their footsteps retracing those of ancestors. Could the Sajama Lines be a monumental version of this tradition, scaled up to awe-inspiring proportions, yet mysteries linger? If these were pilgrimage routes, where are the resting spots, the way stations for weary travelers? Few such sites have been found, raising the possibility that the journeys were symbolic rituals performed by small groups of priests or shamans rather than masses of pilgrims. Or perhaps the act of walking the lines itself was the offering, a test of endurance in the thin, punishing air of the altiplano. Whatever the case, the ritual pathway theory offers more than just an explanation. It transforms these geometric marvels from mere markings into a window into the spiritual world of their creators, a world where every line was a bridge between the human and the divine. One of the most captivating theories about the Sajama Lines suggests they functioned as a colossal astronomical observatory, their straight paths acting as celestial guideposts to track the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. Imagine standing at the center of this vast geometric web as dawn breaks on the winter solstice, watching the first rays of sunlight slice precisely along one of these ancient lines, an event that would transform the entire landscape into a living calendar. Researchers have identified several paths that align almost perfectly with solstice sunrises and sunsets, their trajectories matching key solar events with uncanny accuracy. One particular line, stretching over 10 miles, points directly to the spot where the sun rises on the June solstice, Bolivia's shortest day. Another aligns with the December solstice, marking the sun's southernmost journey. These aren't vague approximations, they're precise enough to suggest deliberate planning, as if the lines were etched to capture celestial moments with scientific precision. But solstices aren't the only potential targets. Some paths seem to frame significant stars or constellations, particularly the Pleiades cluster, known as Kulka in Aymara cosmology. This star group holds deep agricultural importance in the Andes. Its first appearance in the night sky traditionally heralds the planting season. Aerial surveys reveal lines that may have served as sight lines to track its rising, allowing ancient observers to synchronize rituals or farming cycles with celestial rhythms. The Milky Way, revered as a celestial river in Andean myth, also intersects with certain paths during key times of the year, further fueling speculation that the lines were part of a grand cosmic blueprint. Critics, however, raise a valid point. With thousands of lines crisscrossing the landscape, some are bound to align with astronomical events purely by chance. To test this, researchers conducted statistical analyses comparing the Sajama Lines' orientations to random distributions. The results were striking. While not every line fits a celestial pattern, clusters of them align with solstices, equinoxes, and bright stars far more frequently than probability would predict. This doesn't prove every path had astronomical significance, but it strongly suggests certain lines were intentionally oriented to the heavens. The question then becomes, were they used for practical timekeeping, sacred rituals, or both? The challenge lies in deciphering intent without written records. Unlike Stonehenge or Chichen Itza, where architectural features clearly mark celestial events, the Sajama Lines offer no obvious viewing platforms or ceremonial structures along their length. Some scholars propose that shamans or astronomers might have walked these paths during key dates, using their straightness as a giant sighting tool to observe celestial bodies rising or setting over distant landmarks. Others argue the alignment served a symbolic purpose, less about precise measurement and more about embedding cosmic order into the very fabric of the land. Perhaps the most intriguing twist comes from modern Aymara elders who describe the lines as Siechala Kunu, or paths of light. In oral traditions passed down through generations, these routes are said to channel energy between the earth and sky, acting as conduits for spiritual forces during celestial events. This blend of astronomy and spirituality mirrors how many indigenous Andean cultures view the cosmos not as distant points of light but as active participants in daily life. Whether the Sajama Lines were a practical observatory, a sacred map, or something beyond our modern categories, their potential celestial connections remind us that their creators saw no divide between science and the sacred. To them, the sky wasn't just something to observe, it was a dimension to walk within, straight path by straight path. In the harsh, arid expanse of the Bolivian altiplano, where rainfall is scarce and survival hinges on finding precious water, the Sajama Lines might hold a surprisingly practical secret, acting as ancient wayfinders leading to life-giving springs. This theory shifts the narrative from celestial mystery to earthly necessity, suggesting these colossal markings were less about the stars and more about survival in one of the most inhospitable environments on Earth. Imagine standing parched under the relentless sun, scanning the horizon for any sign of water, when suddenly you spot one of these straight paths cutting through the landscape. Following it could mean the difference between life and death, leading you to a hidden spring or a network of underground channels known as puquios, similar to those used by ancient cultures across the Andes. Archaeologists point to the line's uncanny tendency to converge around natural water sources, small oases, seasonal streams, or even subterranean aquifers. In a land where water dictates movement, these paths could have functioned like prehistoric highways, guiding nomadic herders and traders to reliable spots where both humans and livestock could drink. The precision of the lines takes on new meaning here. Maintaining straightness wouldn't just be an artistic or spiritual choice, but a navigational one. A winding path might obscure the destination, but a straight line, that's a beacon. Recent LIDAR surveys reveal that some lines align with underground faults where water naturally collects, suggesting their creators possessed an intimate knowledge of hydrogeology, an understanding passed down through generations. But water alone doesn't explain the sheer scale. Enter the trade route hypothesis. The altiplano wasn't just barren wilderness, it was a crossroads for ancient exchange, where goods like obsidian, salt, and coca leaves traveled between distant communities. The lines grid like pattern mirrors later Inca Cuhapac Nyan roads, straight, efficient routes designed for rapid movement. Could the Sajama Lines have been an early prototype, marking safe passages through this treacherous landscape? Traces of ancient campsites and artifact caches found along certain paths support this idea, hinting at rest stops for weary travelers. Yet skeptics question why anyone would carve permanent lines when simple cairns or wooden markers would suffice. The answer might lie in the line's dual purpose. In Andean cosmology, water isn't just a resource, it's sacred, personified by mountain spirits and rain deities. A path leading to a spring could also be a pilgrimage route, merging practicality with spirituality. Modern Aymara communities still conduct rituals at water sources, offering prayers to Pachamama for sustenance. The lines might have served a similar role, guiding both thirsty llamas and worshippers in a single, purposeful design. What's most striking is the adaptability this theory reveals. Unlike rigid astronomical alignments, water-centric explanations account for regional variations. Some lines cluster around wetlands, while others span drier zones, possibly marking seasonal routes. This flexibility reflects the ingenuity of the people who carved them, tailoring their colossal project to the land's rhythms. Whether as survival tools, trade corridors, or sacred conduits, the Sajama Lines remind us that ancient engineering wasn't just about grand gestures. Sometimes the deepest mysteries are born from the simplest need to find water, and with it, life, of course. No ancient mystery would be complete without its share of extraterrestrial theories, and the Sajama Lines are no exception. Some fringe enthusiasts insist these impossibly straight paths must be landing strips for alien spacecraft, arguing that only advanced technology could achieve such precision over vast distances. It's a seductive idea, especially when you consider the sheer scale of the lines stretching across the horizon like a giant runway. But let's pause for a reality check. If extraterrestrials had the technology to cross light years of space, would they really need dirt paths to land their ships? The alien hypothesis isn't new. Similar claims have swirled around the Nazca Lines for decades, with proponents pointing to the elaborate animal figures as proof of otherworldly influence. Yet archaeological evidence tells a different story. At Nazca, researchers have found wooden stakes and simple surveying tools buried near the geoglyphs, proof that ancient people used rudimentary but effective methods to create these designs. The same likely applies to the Sajama Lines. Indigenous cultures across the Andes were masters of geometry and astronomy, capable of feats that seem impossible only because we've underestimated their ingenuity. What's fascinating, though, is why these extraterrestrial theories persist. Part of it stems from a lingering bias, the assumption that ancient people couldn't possibly accomplish sophisticated engineering without outside help. It's a narrative that dismisses indigenous knowledge as primitive, ignoring the meticulous observation and collective effort that went into projects like the Sajama Line. But there's also a deeper, almost poetic appeal to the alien idea. These lines are otherworldly in their perfection, their scale defying easy explanation. When faced with something so awe-inspiring, it's tempting to reach for cosmic answers. The truth is, the real marvel lies in human achievement. Cultures like the Aymara didn't need alien intervention to map the stars or carve paths into the earth. They had something far more powerful: generations of accumulated wisdom, a profound connection to their environment, and the patience to work on a timescale we can barely fathom. That's not just plausible, it's extraordinary. So while the idea of ancient astronauts might make for thrilling storytelling, the reality is even more remarkable. These lines are a testament to what people, not aliens, can accomplish when they work in harmony with the land and the sky. The construction of the Sajama Lines would have been a monumental test of human patience and precision, a slow, methodical dance between artisans and the unforgiving landscape. Unlike modern projects fueled by machinery, these paths were carved using tools so simple they'd seem rudimentary today: wooden stakes, woven ropes, and handheld stones. Picture teams of workers kneeling in the thin mountain air, painstakingly scraping away the darker surface layer of the altiplano's volcanic soil to reveal the lighter substrate beneath. This wasn't just digging, it was a form of reverse embroidery, where every stroke of a stone tool or drag of a wooden plank had to be perfectly aligned to maintain those jaw-dropping straight lines across miles of uneven terrain. How did they achieve such geometric perfection without modern surveying equipment? One theory points to a technique still used by some Andean farmers today, the huarachi method. By stretching long ropes between stakes anchored in the earth, crews could create sight lines as precise as any laser guide. Teams would work in segments, adjusting for elevation changes by using simple water levels, hollowed out logs filled with liquid, to ensure each section remained flawlessly straight, even as the land rose or fell beneath them. The real genius lay in their understanding of perspective. From ground level, even a slight curve might go unnoticed, but from above, any deviation would stick out like a scar. They weren't just building for the present, they were crafting something meant to be seen from heights they could only imagine. Labor organization would have been just as critical as the tools. Unlike the top-down projects of empires like the Inca, the Sajama Lines likely emerged from communal effort, a collective undertaking woven into the fabric of daily life. Seasonal work parties might have gathered during lulls in the agricultural calendar, with different families or clans responsible for maintaining specific sections. This wasn't forced labor but a sacred duty, a way to bind the community to the land and to each other. Evidence from similar sites suggests that construction could have been ritualized, with offerings buried at key points or ceremonies performed to bless the work. The lines weren't just physical marks, they were a covenant between people and place. The sheer endurance required boggles the mind. At altitudes where every breath feels like sipping air through a straw, workers would have moved at a measured pace, their progress dictated as much by the environment as by ambition. Unlike the rapid earth-moving of modern construction, this was a dialogue with the land, each scrape of a tool, each adjustment of a rope responding to the contours of the earth. Mistakes weren't easily erased. A misaligned segment might require days of rework. Yet somehow, across generations, they persevered, turning an entire plateau into a testament to human tenacity. What's most humbling is the scale of their vision. While we might focus on the lines themselves, their creators were likely thinking in centuries, not years. This wasn't a project for immediate reward, but a legacy, a way to etch their presence into the bones of the earth. The tools were simple, the methods born of observation and tradition, but the result, a masterpiece of persistence, one that challenges us to rethink what's possible when hands and purpose align. When the Inca Empire expanded into the Bolivian altiplano in the 15th century, they encountered a landscape already etched with these mysterious lines, a network so vast it must have left them awestruck. How did this powerful civilization, known for its meticulous infrastructure, interact with these ancient markings? The Inca were master road builders, their famed Quhapac-Ñan highway system stretching over 24,000 miles across the Andes, connecting mountains, deserts, and jungles with astonishing precision. At first glance, some Sajama lines do resemble segments of these Inca roads, straight, purposeful, and engineered for efficiency. But here's the twist. Carbon dating suggests most lines predate the Inca by centuries, possibly even millennia. So did the Inca ignore them, adopt them, or alter them to fit their own empire? Archaeological clues hint at a fascinating interplay. While the Inca didn't originate the lines, they likely recognized their strategic value. Evidence from nearby sites shows Inca outposts built along certain paths, suggesting they used them as ready-made routes for messengers and troops. But unlike their own roads, which often featured drainage systems, staircases, and way stations, the Sajama lines remained largely unmodified. This raises a compelling question. Why wouldn't the Inca, notorious for their bureaucratic control, rebuild these paths to their own standards? The answer might lie in the line's sacred significance. The Inca were pragmatic conquerors, but they also absorbed local beliefs, often incorporating existing sacred sites into their cosmology. If the lines were already viewed as spiritual pathways by the Aymara, altering them could have risked alienating their new subjects. The differences between the two networks are just as telling. Inca roads prioritized function, winding around obstacles, climbing slopes with stone steps, and connecting administrative hubs. The Sajama lines, by contrast, refused to bend even for geography, plowing straight up hills and across valleys as if defying the terrain itself. This distinction suggests the lines served a different master, not the logistics of empire, but something more symbolic. Yet in rare cases, the Inca seem to have added their own flourishes. Near the town of Tambo Quemado, a segment of line intersects with a small Inca shrine, its walls aligned to the path's trajectory. Was this coincidence or deliberate appropriation? The most tantalizing evidence comes from oral histories. Inca scribes recorded myths about Viracocha, the creator god, who was said to have walked straight paths across the land, teaching humanity the arts of civilization. Could the Sajama lines have inspired these legends? Some scholars argue the Inca saw the lines as divine handiwork, vestiges of a primordial order they sought to emulate. Others propose the Inca used them as territorial markers, aligning their own sex system, a web of sacred lines radiating from Cusco with these pre-existing geoglyphs. Either way, the Incas' relationship with the lines wasn't one of dominance but dialogue. They didn't erase the past, they threaded their empire through it, leaving the mystery intact for us to unravel centuries later. Even after decades of study, the Sajama Lines stubbornly cling to their secrets, leaving researchers grappling with questions that peel back like layers of an ancient onion. Take their overwhelming number. Why carve not dozens, not hundreds, but thousands of these paths across such an expansive canvas? Modern roads serve clear purposes, connecting cities, delivering goods, but this sprawling network defies simple explanation. Some theories suggest each line may have represented clan territories or acted as ritual pathways for different ceremonies. Others propose they were cumulative, added over centuries as new generations left their mark. Yet no known culture creates infrastructure at this scale without practical need, raising the tantalizing possibility that their true function lies beyond our current understanding. Then there's the puzzle of location. Why here, in one of the most inhospitable corners of the Andes? The altiplano is a land of extremes, blistering ultraviolet radiation, oxygen-starved air, and temperatures that swing from freezing to scorching within hours. For a civilization to invest generations laboring here suggests the site held extraordinary significance. Perhaps the volcanic soil, rich in minerals, held spiritual meaning. Or maybe the isolation itself was the point, a sacred space removed from everyday life, where straight paths could channel energy uninterrupted. The nearby Sajama volcano, a towering deity in local cosmology, looms over the lines, hinting they might anchor this entire landscape to the realm of the gods. Most perplexing of all, how did ancient planners achieve such precision without a bird's-eye view? From ground level, maintaining straightness across miles of uneven terrain seems almost supernatural. Some researchers speculate they used smoke columns or mirrored sunlight to align distant markers, while others point to the stars, suggesting certain lines acted as terrestrial mirrors of celestial patterns. But these explanations still falter when faced with the line's relentless accuracy. Imagine trying to carve a perfectly straight trench 12 miles long using only ropes and stakes, with no way to check your work from above. The margin for error would be microscopic, yet somehow they did it repeatedly. What makes these questions so compelling isn't just their mystery, but what they reveal about our own limitations. We're a culture that maps every inch of the planet with satellites, yet we still can't fully grasp how ancient people accomplished this with stone tools and collective memory. The lack of definitive answers isn't a flaw, it's the point. These lines remind us that history isn't a puzzle to be solved, but a conversation across millennia, one where we're still learning to listen. Today, the Sajama Lines face threats their creators could never have imagined. Tourism, while bringing global attention, leaves fragile paths vulnerable to erosion from countless footsteps and off-road vehicles. Unlike the Nazca Lines, which are strictly protected flight zones, Bolivia's altiplano remains open terrain. No barriers stop visitors from wandering directly across ancient markings that have survived millennia but might not withstand modern footprints. Compounding the problem, climate change is altering the region's delicate balance. Rising temperatures intensify evaporation, drying out the already parched soil and making it more susceptible to wind erosion. Unpredictable rainfall, now heavier when it comes, carves gullies through carefully preserved paths, blurring their edges like a fading drawing. But the most urgent danger comes from mining. Bolivia's lithium and silver reserves lie beneath these high plains, and concessions for extraction sometimes overlap with the lines. Heavy machinery, road construction, and groundwater pumping could obliterate entire sections overnight. Local activists tell of mining trucks cutting new routes indiscriminately, their tires crushing irreplaceable cultural heritage. While some companies conduct archaeological surveys before digging, enforcement remains spotty in this remote region. The paradox is bitter. The same minerals fueling green technology might erase ancient landscapes that sustained life for generations, yet hope isn't lost. Bolivian researchers and Aymara communities are pioneering innovative preservation methods. In 2018, archaeologists partnered with villagers to map vulnerable sections using drones, creating high-resolution models to monitor degradation. Traditional knowledge plays a crucial role. Elders teach younger generations how to read the land's subtle signs, ensuring stewardship continues beyond textbooks. Schools near Sajama now include the lines in their curriculum, fostering pride and awareness in the next guardians of this legacy. A UNESCO evaluation for World Heritage status could be a game changer. Designation would bring funding for protective measures, from reinforced viewing platforms to community-led patrols, but the process is fraught with tension. Some locals worry top-down conservation might restrict ancestral land use, like grazing llamas along age-old routes. The challenge lies in balancing preservation with living traditions, protecting the lines without turning them into sterile museum pieces. The Sajama Lines have endured earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and centuries of wind, their greatest test coexisting with a world that's only just discovered them. Whether they survive may depend on something as fragile as the altiplano's ecosystem, humanity's willingness to listen not just to the past, but to the communities who still call this sacred landscape home. Among the Aymara elders, the Sajama Lines are woven into stories that blur the line between history and legend, tales where gods walked the earth and giants shaped the land with their hands. One recurring myth speaks of chulpas, ancient stone towers dotting the altiplano, said to be the work of a race of primordial beings who built them before the sun rose for the first time. These giants, taller than the trees that once grew here, are credited with carving the lines by dragging their colossal fingers across the earth, marking sacred pathways for their celestial journeys. Other versions tell of etched, mountain spirits who descended from the peaks to etch these straight paths as conduits for their divine energy, ensuring the land remained connected to the heavens. These stories aren't just fanciful folklore, they're cultural memory encoded in metaphor. When an Aymara elder describes the lines as the footprints of the gods, they're preserving a truth deeper than literal history. The giants and spirits in these tales might symbolize the collective labor of generations, their superhuman feats echoing the real-life endurance of the people who crafted these marvels. Consider the Aymara concept of pacha, where time isn't linear but layered, with past and present coexisting. In this worldview, the lines aren't relics but living entities, their creators still present in the stories whispered across campfires. One particularly haunting legend revolves around Tunupa, a volcanic deity associated with lightning and thunder. Villagers near Sajama speak of a night when Tunupa strode across the plateau, his staff striking the ground with such force that it left glowing fissures in the earth, lines that cooled into the paths we see today. Scientists might dismiss this as poetic exaggeration, but the details align curiously with geological realities. The altiplano is a seismic hotspot, and volcanic activity could have inspired these narratives. The legend even specifies that Tunupa's staff was made of copper, a metal mined in the region for millennia, hinting at how oral traditions preserve fragments of tangible history within their symbolism. Then there's the tale of the Karasiri, a malevolent spirit said to roam the lines at night, preying on travelers who stray from the paths. Parents warn children that the Karasiri, often depicted as a pale, ghostly figure, uses the lines to navigate, their straightness allowing it to move swiftly under the moonlight. On the surface, it's a cautionary story, but scholars suggest it might encode practical wisdom. The altiplano's brutal climate claims lives even today. The Karasiri myth could have been a way to discourage nighttime travel, ensuring people stayed near known routes where help was reachable. What makes these stories so compelling is their resilience. Despite centuries of colonization and cultural suppression, they've survived, passed down through generations like an invisible thread connecting modern Aymara to their ancestors. The lines themselves might fade under wind and hoof, but the stories, they endure, adapting yet always anchoring the present to the past. And that's the real magic, not whether giants literally walked here, but how these tales keep a civilization's heartbeat alive, pulsing through time as steadily as the lines stretch toward the horizon. The Sajama Lines aren't alone in their mysteries scattered across the globe. Other ancient cultures left their own colossal marks on the earth, each with its own story to tell. Take Kazakhstan's steppe geoglyphs, discovered only in 2007 by a sharp-eyed economist browsing satellite images. These enormous earthworks, some forming perfect squares or crosses over 900 feet across, sprawl across the northern steppes like a giant's game board. At first glance, they share striking similarities with Bolivia's lines. Both are best viewed from above. Both defy easy explanation, and both were crafted by cultures with no written records to explain their purpose. But dig deeper and the differences emerge. While the Sajama Lines prioritize relentless straightness, Kazakhstan's designs embrace geometric shapes, suggesting a focus on symmetry rather than directional alignment. Archaeologists theorize these might have been tribal gathering sites or even ancient solar calendars, with some formations aligning to sunrise during equinoxes. Yet unlike the Sajama network, which feels systematic, the steppe geoglyphs appear more sporadic, as if different groups left their own signatures across the land. Then there are the Arabian desert kites, vast stone structures shaped like hourglasses, stretching from Saudi Arabia to Syria. These aren't lines but funnel-like traps, some dating back 9,000 years, designed to corral wild animals toward hunting pits. At first, they seem purely practical, but their scale hints at something more. Some kites span miles, with arms so straight they rival the precision of the Sajama Lines. What's fascinating is how they reflect a universal human impulse to reshape the landscape for survival, whether channeling herds or marking celestial events. Both the kites and the Sajama Lines testify to ancient peoples' intimate knowledge of their environment, manipulating terrain with a mastery we're only beginning to understand. Halfway across the world, Australia's Merryman offers a modern counterpoint, a 2.5-mile-long figure etched into the outback in 1998, so large it's visible from space. Unlike the ancient geoglyphs, its origins are disputed. Was it a prank, an art project? But its existence proves the allure of leaving giant marks endures. Yet compare it to the Sajama Lines and the contrast is stark. One took weeks to bulldoze, the other required generations to perfect. One is a solitary figure, the other a sprawling network. The difference between a whisper and a symphony, perhaps the most thought-provoking parallel, lies in England's Uffington White Horse, a chalk figure carved into a hillside over 3,000 years ago. Like the Sajama Lines, it demands to be seen from a distance, its elongated form only making sense when viewed from the air or opposing slopes. Both sites suggest a desire to communicate with beings beyond the human scale, whether gods, ancestors, or the land itself. But where the White Horse is singular and symbolic, the Sajama Lines are systematic, almost obsessive in their repetition. That's the real takeaway. These geoglyphs aren't just art or engineering. They're mirrors reflecting how different cultures answered the same burning question: how to leave a mark that outlasts stone, that speaks across millennia. The Sajama Lines stand apart not in their strangeness, but in their sheer ambition, a testament to what happens when humanity's desire to connect transcends the practical and touches the eternal. For centuries, the true majesty of the Sajama Lines remained hidden, visible only in fragments to those standing on the ground, their grand design obscured by the very landscape they adorned. That all changed when modern technology gave us wings. Satellite imagery and drone photography didn't just reveal these ancient paths, they transformed them into an entirely new spectacle. From high above, the lines morph into something almost alien, a geometric tapestry so precise, so vast, it feels like a message written for the sky itself. Early aerial surveys in the 1990s captured the first jaw-dropping panoramas, showing lines intersecting at perfect angles, running parallel for miles, and forming grids that dwarfed anything previously documented. But it wasn't until drones entered the picture that researchers could study them in intimate detail, hovering just meters above the ground to capture textures invisible from satellites, faint tool marks, subtle depressions, and even traces of white quartz stones arranged at intervals like breadcrumbs left by ancient surveyors. The real game changer, though, has been LiDAR light detection and ranging technology that strips away vegetation and surface clutter to map the Earth's bare contours. When researchers first scanned sections of the altiplano with LiDAR, they uncovered something startling: buried lines. Centuries of wind and dust had erased entire segments from view, but beneath the surface, the ghostly outlines remained, revealing an even more extensive network than anyone suspected. Some of these hidden paths branch off abruptly, suggesting unfinished projects or routes abandoned when their purpose faded. Others intersect with known lines at precise geometric nodes, hinting at a layered construction spanning generations. The implications are staggering. What we've seen so far might be just the tip of the iceberg. Then there are the patterns only visible from space. Multispectral imaging, which analyzes light wavelengths beyond human vision, has detected subsoil disturbances along certain lines, evidence of ancient fires, ceremonial offerings, or even temporary campsites. These thermal fingerprints suggest the lines weren't just static markers but living spaces, used for rituals or communal gatherings. One particularly striking discovery came from NASA's Advanced Land Observing Satellite, which revealed that clusters of lines align not just with solstices but with the cyclical flooding patterns of long-vanished lakes. Suddenly, the practical and sacred blur. Were these paths celestial calendars, waterway guides, or both? But technology's greatest gift might be its ability to preserve what time erodes. Photogrammetry, stitching thousands of high-res images into 3D models, lets researchers study the lines without setting foot on them, reducing damage from tourism and climate change. These digital twins aren't just research tools, they're time capsules, ensuring future generations can explore these wonders even if the originals fade. And with AI now analyzing line orientations across thousands of square miles, algorithms are spotting correlations no human could, like subtle repetitions in spacing that might encode mathematical constants or lunar cycles. Yet for all our tech, some mysteries resist even the sharpest lenses. Why do certain lines abruptly change direction mid-path as if correcting course? What explains the eerie clusters where dozens of lines converge like spokes on a wheel? Every pixel of new imagery seems to add another layer to the puzzle. Perhaps that's the true magic of the Sajama Lines. They meet our brightest tools with equal brilliance, revealing just enough to keep us hungry for more. In the age of viral clickbait and AI-generated conspiracy theories, the Sajama Lines have become fertile ground for wild speculation and outright fabrication. One persistent myth insists these ancient paths exhibit perfect geometric precision, aligning with advanced mathematical constants like pi or the golden ratio, claims that crumble under basic scrutiny. While the lines are undeniably straight over vast distances, aerial surveys show subtle deviations when measured with modern tools. They're astonishing feats of engineering, not supernatural anomalies. This distinction matters because exaggerating their perfection risks overshadowing the real marvel: how indigenous cultures achieved such accuracy with rudimentary technology and communal effort. Then there are the fabricated discoveries. A viral post from 2021 claimed researchers had uncovered hidden binary code within the line patterns, a story quickly debunked as digital art superimposed on satellite images. Another hoax involved a self-proclaimed explorer announcing he'd found alien hieroglyphs at a line intersection, later revealed to be recent graffiti. These fabrications aren't harmless. They divert attention from legitimate research while disrespecting the cultural heritage of the Aymara people, who have preserved knowledge of these paths for generations. The allure of cracking an ancient code taps into a deeper bias, the assumption that pre-industrial societies couldn't create sophisticated designs without outside help or secret knowledge. This narrative ignores the meticulous environmental observations and painstaking labor behind the lines. For example, claims that the grid mirrors, advanced astronomical calculators, often cherry-pick alignments while ignoring lines that don't fit the theory. Archaeologists counter that celestial connections likely existed alongside practical functions, not as standalone puzzles waiting for modern decryption. What's lost in these myths is the tangible evidence staring us in the face. Quartz stones placed at intervals along certain paths suggest methodical surveying, not divine intervention. Faint pottery shards near intersections point to ritual use, not extraterrestrial visitors. Even the straightness itself has a down-to-earth explanation. Stretched fiber ropes and sighting poles, techniques still used by Andean farmers today to plot irrigation channels. The truth doesn't need embellishment, it's compelling enough. Critical thinking doesn't diminish the line's wonder, it deepens our respect for their creators. Every exaggerated claim risks turning an archaeological treasure into a pop culture caricature, stripping away the cultural context that gives these paths meaning. The real mystery isn't whether aliens built them, it's why we're so quick to credit anyone but the indigenous visionaries who clearly did. Their legacy deserves better than shortcuts and sensationalism. It deserves our patience, our rigor, and above all, our willingness to listen to the land itself. Clark Erickson has spent decades studying the intricate earthworks of the Andes, but even he admits the Sajama Lines still keep him guessing. You can survey one line and think you've cracked the pattern, he says, then walk 5 miles and find a cluster that completely defies your theory. His fieldwork here reads like an adventure novel digging through layers of volcanic sediment with fingertips numb from altitude sickness, racing afternoon storms that turn the soil to glue, and nights spent squinting at drone footage under a headlamp tracing faint paths the naked eye can't see. What sticks with him isn't just the scale, but the intimacy of the craftsmanship. These weren't slapped together. You'll find segments where someone clearly corrected a slight curve, reworking the trench until it met their exacting standard. That level of care across thousands of paths, that's devotion. Local researcher Marisol Fernandez grew up herding llamas near these lines, their presence as mundane as the mountains until she saw them from above. My grandfather used to say the old ones walked them at dawn so their shadows would touch the gods, she recounts. Now, blending archaeology with oral history, she's uncovered quartz markers placed at precise intervals along certain routes, echoing traditional Aymara boundary stones. Western science wants one grand explanation, but our ancestors thought in layers. A path could guide herders to water, align with the June solstice, and honor Apu Sajama all at once. Her biggest frustration, the assumption that complexity requires outside influence. We've been engineers since before your Rome had sewers. Why is that so hard to believe? For geographer Tomas Huanca, the real mystery isn't how they were made, but why they've been ignored. Nazca gets documentaries and helicopter tours. We get archaeologists who visit once and declare the lines simpler because they lack animal figures. He points to a 1930s aerial photo buried in Ola Paz archive, the first known image capturing the full spectacle, that was dismissed as natural erosion patterns by foreign scholars. Imagine if those same scholars had bothered to walk them. You can feel the purpose in your bones when you follow one for hours, straight as an arrow through rubble and ravines. His current project, documenting how specific lines align with underground water channels, suggesting the ancients mapped aquifers we're only now detecting with satellites. Then there's the younger generation, like drone mapping specialist Rafael Choke, who sees technology as a bridge between past and present. My grandfather's people plotted these lines by stretching ropes between mountain peaks. Now I use GPS waypoints, but the principle is the same, precision guided by the land. His thermal scans recently revealed subterranean ash deposits along certain paths, hinting at ritual fires lit during construction. We're not just studying ruins, we're decoding an instruction manual for living in harmony with this brutal, beautiful place. What unites these voices is a shared frustration with the line's anonymity. As Erickson puts it, if these were in Europe, they'd be as famous as Stonehenge, but here, they're not even on most maps. Perhaps that's the final irony, an engineering marvel visible from space, yet still waiting for the world to truly see it. Standing on the edge of the Sajama Lines today feels like stepping into a living paradox, ancient mastery, stretched beneath a sky that hasn't changed since their creators walked here. The first thing that strikes you isn't the lines themselves, but the sheer brutality of the environment. At over 12,000 feet, the air is thin enough to leave even fit hikers gasping after a few steps. The sun burns with an almost metallic intensity, reflecting off the pale soil until the horizon shimmers like a mirage. Winds whip unpredictably, carrying grit that stings exposed skin. This isn't a place that welcomes casual visitors, it demands respect. Local Aymara guides, descendants of the line's likely creators, approach the landscape with a reverence that borders on ceremony. Don Emiliano, a herder who's led researchers across these paths for decades, stops at certain intersections to press coca leaves into the earth, a whispered offering to Pachamama. You don't just look with eyes, he insists, pressing a palm to the ground. You listen with the land. His tours aren't typical guided hikes, but slow, intentional walks where he points out subtleties invisible to outsiders. A slight depression where offerings were once placed, a quartz vein that mirrors the line's trajectory, or how certain paths feel firmer underfoot compacted by centuries of ritual foot traffic. From ground level, the lines play tricks on perception. What appears as a faint scratch in the dirt when you're standing beside it sharpens into startling clarity when you follow it, like a thread emerging from a tapestry. Some vanish entirely when the sun is high, only reappearing at dawn or dusk when shadows carve them back into relief. It's this ephemeral quality that makes drone footage so jarring to visitors. After hours of squinting at nearly invisible trails, watching a tablet screen reveal perfect geometric grids from above feels like discovering a hidden dimension. But this fragile balance is under threat. Unlike fenced-off sites like Nazca, the Sajama Lines remain unprotected, no barriers, no guards, just vast openness. A single motorbike track cutting across a line can erase centuries of preservation. Guides recount finding tire marks from off-road tourists who veered off paths or shallow trenches where visitors dug for artifacts, unaware they're destroying the artifact itself. The altitude compounds the problem. Emergency services are hours away, and many underestimate how quickly dehydration or altitude sickness can strike. Responsible visitation starts with recognizing these aren't outdoor museums but sacred landscapes still woven into living culture. Local cooperatives now offer guided hikes that fund conservation while sharing Aymara traditions. Visitors learn to walk single file along line edges rather than trampling them, to carry out every scrap of waste and, most crucially, to resist the urge to find undiscovered paths. As Don Emiliano puts it, the lines choose who sees them, not the other way around. The reward for this patience, moments of pure revelation like watching sunset light pour down a 12-mile path like liquid gold, turning what seemed like simple dirt into a conduit for something timeless. The Sajama Lines aren't just relics of the past, they pulse through Bolivia's creative spirit, their stark geometry echoing in the bold strokes of contemporary painters, the rhythm of modern poetry, even the silhouettes of urban architecture. Take La Paz-based artist Claudia Fernandez, whose sprawling canvases transform the lines into vibrant abstractions. Using natural pigments ground from the same ochre soils the ancients once scraped, she layers their angular forms with symbols from Aymara textiles, creating a dialogue between past and present. These paths aren't just on the land, she explains, they're in our DNA. When I paint them, it feels like retracing footsteps my ancestors left for me. Her work hangs in galleries from Buenos Aires to Berlin, introducing global audiences to this hidden wonder through visceral swirls of burnt umber and cobalt ancient geometry reborn in acrylic. Literature too bends under their influence. Poet Ramiro Ortega's acclaimed collection, The Straightness of Time, weaves the lines into metaphors for cultural resilience, furrows plowed by stars, refusing to bend, even to the wind's teeth. His verses mirror the Aymara concept of Siechixi, where opposites coexist without blending, much like the line's rigid paths harmonizing with the wild altiplano. Younger writers like Luz Maleva go further, reimagining the lines as sci-fi corridors in speculative stories where they transmit messages to parallel worlds. Why limit them to history, she argues? Our ancestors thought in millennia. Maybe they built these not just for us but for civilizations yet to come. In Bolivia's bustling cities, the line's legacy takes concrete form. Architect Marcelo Quispe incorporated their grid into the San Pedro Cultural Center's floor plan. Walk its halls, and you're tracing a modern echo of those ancient paths. Even street art pays homage. Murals in El Alto recast the lines as laser beams or sound waves, framing them as living energy rather than static marks. Perhaps most striking is how they've seeped into national identity. When Bolivia redesigned its passport in 2019, subtle line patterns edged each page, a quiet declaration that these geoglyphs are as integral to the country's soul as its mountains or mine. The lines also dance beyond traditional art. Electronic musician Amaru Villanueva samples the wind howling across their trenches into ambient tracks, while choreographer Carla Estrada's troupe interprets them through movement, performers crossing the stage in relentless straight lines, their bodies becoming transient extensions of those eternal marks. Even fashion embraces them. Designer Ana Chapona's runway collections feature laser-cut leather mimicking the grooves, proving their aesthetic transcends medium. What unites these diverse interpretations is a shared refusal to treat the lines as artifacts under glass. They're not merely studied, they're conversed with, argued against, reimagined. In a nation where colonial histories often overshadow indigenous achievement, this creative resurgence reclaims the narrative, not through academic lectures, but through the universal language of art. The Sajama Lines may have been carved in stillness, but their cultural echoes are anything but silent. The harsh, bone-dry climate of the Bolivian altiplano has been the silent guardian of the Sajama Lines for centuries, a perfect storm of conditions that turned this landscape into a natural museum. With less than 10 inches of rainfall per year, the arid air acts like a preservative, slowing decay to a crawl. The same relentless winds that make living here a challenge also play a crucial role, scouring away just enough surface debris to keep the lines visible without erasing them entirely. It's a delicate equilibrium. The soil's high salt content hardens the trenches, while the sparse vegetation means roots don't disturb their edges. Even the extreme temperature swings, searing days followed by freezing nights, contribute by preventing the microbial activity that would otherwise blur these ancient marks. For over 2,000 years, this inhospitable environment has been the line's unlikely ally, freezing them in time like ink on parchment. But that balance is unraveling. Climate change is rewriting the rules of preservation, turning the altiplano's stabilizing extremes into threats. Rising temperatures accelerate evaporation, drying the soil into brittle dust that's easily scattered by increasingly violent windstorms. When rare rains do come, they're often torrential, gouging new channels through fragile paths that survived intact for millennia. Satellite images show worrying changes. Segments near Lake Pupo, once buffered by humidity from the shrinking waters, now fade faster as the lake disappears. The very conditions that protected the lines are becoming their undoing, leaving archaeologists racing against a clock they never expected to face. This isn't just a Bolivian problem. From the melting permafrost exposing Viking artifacts in Greenland to rising seas eating away at Mesoamerican coastal ruins, heritage sites worldwide are becoming climate change's silent casualties. The Sajama Lines spotlight a painful irony. The same remote locations that shielded ancient treasures from human interference now make them vulnerable. Unlike urban monuments that can be shielded by seawalls or air-filtered domes, these geoglyphs rely entirely on their environment's natural stability. Conservationists grapple with impossible choices, intervene with artificial barriers, and risk altering the landscape's sacred integrity, or stand by as weather erases centuries of history. Local Aymara communities offer a third path, one that blends traditional knowledge with modern science. Elders recall cycles of drought and recovery embedded in oral histories, suggesting the lines have faced climate shifts before. Some propose reviving ancient water management techniques, like rebuilding neglected kochas, small reservoirs that once regulated moisture across the plateau. Others advocate for soft interventions, like transplanting hardy native grasses along vulnerable segments to anchor the soil without obscuring the lines. These solutions aren't just practical, they're philosophical, treating preservation as collaboration with the land rather than control over it. The Sajama Lines have survived empires, conquests, and the slow creep of oblivion. Their newest test isn't just environmental, it's a question of how we value the fragile threads connecting us to the past. As the altiplano changes, these ancient paths force us to confront a truth as unflinching as their geometry. Some legacies aren't meant to be frozen in time, but to evolve even as they whisper across the centuries. The next decade could rewrite everything we know about the Sajama Lines, thanks to cutting-edge technologies and fresh approaches finally piercing their ancient secrets. Archaeologists are preparing the first large-scale excavations along key intersections, armed with ground-penetrating radar that can map subterranean features without disturbing the fragile surface. Early test scans have already revealed buried stone alignments beneath certain paths, possible ritual offerings or surveying markers placed by the original builders. But the real game-changer will be a multinational project deploying airborne lidar across the entire 22,000 square kilometer network, creating the first complete 3D atlas of these geoglyphs. This isn't just about documenting what's visible, it's about uncovering the lines that have faded completely from view, erased by time but preserved beneath layers of volcanic dust. Citizen science initiatives are also bridging the gap between researchers and local communities. An innovative app called Sajama Vision allows Aymara herders and farmers to photograph subtle changes in the lines they encounter during daily life. Cracked segments, animal disturbances, or unusual vegetation growth. These real-time observations help prioritize conservation efforts while preserving traditional knowledge about the landscape. One teenage participant recently spotted previously unnoticed stone cairns along a remote line segment, a discovery that might reveal how ancient builders maintained such uncanny straightness over miles. The most tantalizing questions may finally get answers. Could isotopic analysis of soil samples pinpoint exactly when different sections were carved? Will pollen trapped in ancient trench sediments reveal what crops sustain the workers? And perhaps most intriguing, do the lines encode mathematical constants or lunar cycles in their spacings, as some astronomers suspect? A team from Cambridge is developing AI to analyze the entire grid for hidden numerical patterns, treating each path as a stroke in some colossal equation. But the boldest experiment comes from experimental archaeologists attempting to recreate a line segment using only pre-Columbian tools and techniques. By having volunteers carve a half-mile trench with stone picks and fiber ropes under Aymara supervision, researchers hope to calculate the staggering manpower required, and perhaps stumble upon forgotten tricks the ancients used. Early trials suggest maintaining straightness may have involved smoke signals between hilltops, a theory bolstered by remnants of burnt offerings found at elevated viewpoints. What's at stake isn't just solving a puzzle, but redefining our understanding of Andean civilization. If these lines prove to be a unified system rather than incremental additions, they might represent the earliest known example of large-scale territorial planning in the Americas. Every answered question peels back another layer, revealing not just how these paths were made, but why they mattered enough to transform an entire plateau into a canvas for the ages. The future of Sajama research isn't about chasing headlines, it's about listening at last to what the land has been whispering all along. Now it's your turn to step into the mystery. What do you think the Sajama lines were really for? Forget the textbooks for a moment. Let's hear your wildest, most imaginative theories. Could they have been an ancient messaging system, with runners following these laser-straight paths to deliver secrets across the plateau? Maybe a colossal board game etched into the earth for deities to play? Or perhaps something even stranger, like a vibrational grid designed to harness energy from the Sajama volcano itself? Don't hold back. History's greatest discoveries often start with someone daring to ask what if. Here's one to chew on. Imagine the lines as a prehistoric social network. What if each intersection was a meeting point for different clans, their precise angles acting like handshakes between tribes? Or consider this, what if they're not paths at all, but shadows? Some cultures built structures to cast ritual shadows during solstices. Could these trenches have framed sunlight in ways we haven't yet decoded? And hey, for the sci-fi fans, any chance these straightaways were runways for hot air balloons? We know pre-Columbian cultures experimented with primitive flight. Could they have taken to the skies centuries before we thought possible? Drop your theories in the comments. No idea is too outlandish. Who knows? Your midnight brainstorm might just spark the next big archaeological breakthrough. And while you're at it, tap those likes and shares. Let's see how many minds we can bend with this ancient puzzle. After all, the Sajama lines didn't just connect points on a map. They're still connecting us across continents and centuries in one endless conversation about the past's untold stories. Ready, set, speculate. The Sajama lines defy simple explanation. They are more than ancient paths etched into the earth. They are a conversation between humanity and time itself. Centuries after their creation, they remain both a puzzle and a revelation, a testament to what people can achieve when vision outlasts lifetimes. Their true purpose may never be fully unlocked, and perhaps that's the point. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, but to remind us of the infinite ways humans have sought meaning through science, spirituality, and the simple act of leaving a mark that says we were here. For the Aymara people, the lines are not relics but living threads in the fabric of their identity, connecting past and present in a landscape where every hill and spring holds a story. For archaeologists, they're a challenge proof that ancient societies achieved feats we're only beginning to measure. And for the rest of us, they're an invitation to wonder, to look beyond the obvious and consider how much history still hums beneath our feet. What makes these lines extraordinary isn't just their precision or scale, but their resilience. They've survived empires, climate shifts, and the slow erosion of memory, yet they endure, not as ruins but as questions. Were they roads to the divine, a celestial map, or something we haven't even imagined? The beauty lies in the uncertainty, in the way they refuse to fit neatly into any one box. So let's keep the conversation alive. Hit that subscribe button to join us as we uncover more of history's unsolved riddles, and drop your boldest theories in the comments. Who do you believe carved these lines? Visionary astronomers, determined pilgrims, or a civilization so in tune with the land they could bend it to their will? The answers might be lost to time, but the mystery, that's forever.